all the other social media platforms. They're playing dirty games and they're being greedy. There's going to become a time where podcasters won't be favored on these podcast platforms, and the advertisers will take over on things like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We have to get our message out there, and we have to build our community. We have to keep finding ways to navigate these market changes. If you don't get good at managing pitfalls and crisis, you're never going to get to the next level. You're never going to win the race. You're never going to be able to get back on the track. If there's anything I've ever said on any of my episodes that I want you to remember the most, it is this right here. I want you to succeed, whether it benefits me or not. I just want to see you win.
This is the Podcast in the Rough. Tune in every Friday for new adventurous episodes.
Welcome back to another episode of the Podcast in the Rough. I'm your host, Zebulon Thomas, and this is episode 152. Today, I want to talk about some strategies because I've been watching a lot of NASCAR. I'm a big NASCAR fan, and I was just like, I want to learn all there is about the strategies in which they use to win a race. And so as I started digging into these strategies and learning about this stuff, because I was like, it's just curious, I started to think about how these strategies on the track can be applied in our business, in our professional lives, and especially in our podcast. So that is when I went into a deep dive and started working on this cool guide. And then I was like, from the guide, I was like, I have to create an episode around this. So that's what this episode today is all about. It is about following the steps and strategies that they use within NASCAR in the same way inside your podcast to win a victory in podcasting. Now, I've prepared a special guide, as I mentioned, that you can download for absolutely free by simply just going to buymeacoffee.com/intherough, and you can download this, and it goes along with this episode. And when you're done, make sure that if you get a win out of it, you share that with me. I would love to know. So share that inside the group. DM me, Zebulon Thomas, on Instagram, or even the new Instagram account that I've set up strictly for this podcast, and that is on Instagram at The Podcast in the Rough. Now, before I jump into this guide, I do want to give you guys an update. I've decided to back away from social media for now. And if you've been following me for a while, you'll notice that I have not been posting on any of my social media accounts. I'm on there viewing it periodically, kind of taking social media in as a viewer, so to speak, and not a content creator. I wanted to give myself a break. I wanted to step away and give myself a mental health break as well as I rebuild and work on myself. And I think that's very important. And I figured I'd lead by example by doing so. This isn't the first time I've taken a break from social media. However, this break is a little different. The first time I left because I just couldn't do it. I was overwhelmed. I basically just ran from it. And I dropped it and I let it all go. I didn't even look at it. I didn't log in. I was gone for a year and a half. This time, I'm just throttling it a little bit. I'm viewing it. I'm looking at things. I'm deciding what works for me, what doesn't, what benefits me, because really it comes down to the benefit. Is social media benefiting me? And I won't get into details about that because I've already talked about that on previous episodes. I'm looking at all this from, a 30,000 foot view. Where does social media fit into my life, my business? Does it really affect my life and business? How does it affect my life and business? And what is going to work for me moving forward? So right now, I'm just not into playing the game of social media. There's too many reasons why it's going to fail for so many of you. And it's going to fail not because you're not good at it. It's not going to fail because you're not spending the amount of time you need to micromanage your social media content. It's not going to fail because the content you post is not good enough. It's going to fail because you're not playing their game, living by their rules, abiding by the agenda and feeding into the agenda that they have prepared for you. And also, it's going to fail because there's no amount of money you can throw at it that will make you successful because they're going to keep being greedy and scaling up. Again, I'm not going to go too much in detail. However, I wanted to share that with you to give you an update because I did miss out on posting an episode last week. And that was because I was really busy and I also needed to take a break. It's good to take breaks. So if you stuck with me and you're still ready to learn, I have some exciting stuff for you today. Season 5 has been dedicated to mental health awareness, sharing my journey and how I'm getting better, and hopefully helping you to go get the help, take the time, and do the things you need for you to get better if you're suffering with mental health or burnout. Today's episode does have a little bit of that inside of this as well. However, I wanted to bring it back to what season 3 and 4 was all about, and that is teaching you podcasting. And so this is kind of like a hybrid, and I love it. So let's dive in. In the competitive arena of podcasting, much like in NASCAR racing, which I love, the success of winning a race hinges on strategy, precision, and adaptability. Just like in your life and in business and in podcasting, you have to be able to pivot at any given time. And that's why I've put this guide together and this episode. This episode is going to be basically focusing on the dynamic world of NASCAR as an inspiration to help all of us podcasters fine-tune our shows and grow our listener base so that we can stand out in a crowded field. So let's dive into the guide section of this episode, and I want you to follow along. So if you need to write this down, write it down, or simply just go download the guide. But apply this to your podcast, just like as if you're on the track, you have a team, you have your pit crew, you have your drivers, your NASCAR, your sponsors, and now we're here. We're ready for the race day. We're on the track. How do we win this thing? Number 1 is pit stop strategy, streamlining production. Regularly evaluate and improve your podcast production process. Consider aspects such as editing software, sound quality, and episode formatting. Periodic reviews can help streamline production, much like strategic pit stops optimize a race car's performance on the track. Number 2, drafting collaborations with fellow podcasters. Just as you see the drivers drafting behind other drivers on the track to gain speed without exerting extra energy, which I love to do, especially when I play my NASCAR video games. That's the strategy. It's like we can go faster, I can get behind another NASCAR, and I can push them away from the pack so we break away, and we're using all that airflow to get faster and faster and faster. And then I wait for my moment, and then I zing up around them, and I take the lead. So I want you to gain that speed without exerting extra energy. So how do you do this in podcasting? Well, you can collaborate with others, whether they're other podcasters or guests, to gain that speed and get more momentum and reach within your podcast. So having guest appearances on your show, cross-promoting with other podcasters or content creators or even just sponsors and brands. And by doing so, sharing that content can increase your audience size and enhance the content quality of each and every episode that you do. Number 3, track position, understanding your niche. Positioning your podcast effectively within your niche is extremely important. Understand your unique value and communicate it clearly to your audience. Same as if you're maintaining a strategic position on the racetrack, knowing and owning your niche helps you retain and grow your listener base. Number 4, fuel management, sustaining motivation and resources. This is a big one. Manage your energy and resources wisely. I say that all the time about making sure you don't burn out by doing too much work or taking on or wearing too many hats in your business or in your podcast. That's why this one is important, because podcasting can be a marathon, and with burnout as a real risk. I've experienced it, and I've shared that plenty of times, and maybe you have too. Don't go into the burnout stage. Find the balance between your workload and outsource tasks when necessary, and keep your passion fueled by engaging with your community and pursuing topics that interest you. If you go after topics that don't interest you, if you're just trying to feed that listener base, that's going to drive you into burnout. And what happens when you burn out? You're sliding all over the track, you wipe out, you cause the big wreck, right? And everyone gets caught up in it, and you crash and burn. You don't cross the finish line. I'm a strong believer in following the strategies that make sure that you don't burn out. Again, if you can turn over some of the workload to someone else in your podcast team or in your corner, do so. Or don't take on too much. Just do what you can. Strategize where you're at. Work with what you got. Build this vehicle to be bigger and bigger over time. Number 5, tire management. Keeping your content fresh. I love how these are coming together. It's really working for me. I love it. Just like as tires wear down in a race, content can become stale if not refreshed. Make sure that you're constantly introducing new topics, innovating formats, or fresh perspectives to keep your audience engaged and excited. One of the things I've been doing, if you noticed, I've been doing seasons. Seasons really help break that up, because season 3 and 4 was dedicated to advancing in podcasting and helping people learn how to podcast from start to success. And then I was like, hey, you know what? I'm going on my own journey to improve myself, improve the quality of my life, and I'm getting help for my burnout and my mental health. I want to make sure I put that first. So I dedicated season 5 to mental health awareness. And so that's helping me keep my content fresh and making sure those tires don't wear out. I basically pulled into the pits, swapped the tires out, and we're back on the same track. So I wanted to share that with you to give you that idea. I'm just trying to expand your mind to think differently about your podcast and the way you move about it. Number 6, adjustment and tuning. leveraging feedback. This is big. Use your listener feedback to make adjustments to your show. Tailor content, pace, and formats based on what resonates with your audience. Similar to how race teams adjust their cars to suit track conditions, make sure you're doing that with your content. And again, I'm obsessed with NASCAR racing. I love it. I love everything about it. I think it's fascinating. I think it's exciting. And I love the energy. So I think about those things within my podcast as well. Like, what are some things that I can tune? What are some things I can gain leverage with? And the best way to do that is to get the feedback, right? Get the feedback from your team, from your pit crew, from the crowd, from your audience, from your sponsors, from the track itself. You know, when you're driving a car, you're going to feel that road underneath your tires. You can tell when the car's a little loose, when it's tighter. You can make those adjustments to make sure you stay on the track and you don't spin out, or in this case, burn out. So it's very important to make sure that you're doing that. Kind of going back to what I talked about in previous episodes about my own podcast community mastermind group on Facebook, been working hard to get the feedback from my audience, whether it's from ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, discussions on YouTube in the comments, or in the threads, on other forums, in my blog post, on my social media accounts, or in the group itself. Getting that feedback really helps me dial in where I need to be within my podcast and still have fun doing it. Number 7, communication and teamwork, building a production team. What does your team look like? Like, is it just you as the host? Do you have a co-host? Sometimes that team expands into your guest speakers. Now they play a role in each episode. They're helping you. They're giving you feedback. And so by doing so, you're building your team, sharing behind the scenes of staff, effectively communicating and showing the teamwork can significantly enhance the quality of your podcast. And the audience wants to see that. I always talk about the hero's journey. We want to know how you built the team. We want to know what it took for you to get to this race, to get on the track, to get the sponsors, to win the race, or to lose the race and bounce back and go at it again for another season, to keep going. We want to share that information so that our audience can feel like they're more a part of that. So that's a starting point to how you can build that team. Maybe you don't have anybody. Maybe you're just a solo host and you have a podcast and it's just you, and you're speaking out into the universe, if you will, like this empty void of podcasters, and you're trying to stand out. Start there. Share the journey, how you got the first mic, the mixer, yada, yada, yada. And then your listeners, your dedicated founding members become your team. And then when you start to grow, you can build that team. And if you have a co-host, boom, you already got it. So make sure you foster a collaborative environment where ideas can flourish with every episode, with every endeavor that you do that moves you forward within your podcast journey. Number 8, racecraft, mastering the art of engagement. As you make these little small steps to grow your podcast and follow along with this guide, I want you to apply this when the time is right. And just learning how to get better at this is really going to improve your skills as a podcaster. So develop your skills in engaging and retaining listeners. This includes mastering the art of storytelling, using compelling hooks, and creating interactive content where listeners feel a part of the conversation. I love talking about that, having a guest on, having a co-host, or speaking directly to your listeners and encouraging them to comment in the comments below the episode or leave a rating and review or to DM you. That really brings all that together. That's how you master the art of engagement. So make sure you're practicing that and you hyper-focus on that. Number 9, adapting to race conditions, navigating market change. Stay adaptive and responsive to change in podcasting trends and technology. That's a big one. And I do this all the time. And you could find yourself experiencing a pitfall here because that could lead you into like buying all the different microphones and all the different mixers. You don't need to go that route. It's okay to expand and play around with these things. But that's also why myself and other podcasters have shared, our experience with different mics and recommended and reviewed different mixers, and so that you don't have to go out there and spend all the money. However, there's other things you need to be paying attention to in podcasting, and that is with the trends and with the new technology that comes about. Is it needed for your podcast? So just be ready to embrace new tools, platforms, and the media consumption habits to keep your podcast relevant and accessible. For a while there, I was just posting strictly on Instagram. Then I checked out TikTok for a little bit. Podcasts were getting a lot of views on TikTok. But then I recently just reminded myself that a lot of these platforms are getting greedy. They're getting to be a pay-to-play, take all your time, all this stuff. And there's too many regulations now, and it's going to fall apart real quick. You'll see. But podcasting, I brought it right back to the platform. Apple Podcast, Spotify, and all the other great places that my podcast is hosted on the dedicated podcast area, or in the arena or the racetrack, if you will. This is where you can consume my podcast episodes. So I'm no longer interested in expanding out at this time, not forever, but just at this time, into all the other social media platforms because they're playing dirty games and they're being greedy. And so right now, that greed has not yet spilled over. And I said yet. Hopefully it never does, but I think there's going to become a time where podcasters won't be favored on these podcast platforms. And the advertisers will take over. And next thing you know, you're having hard embedded ads within your episodes on things like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if it hasn't already happened by the time you're hearing this episode, unfortunately, that's the case. So we just have to work with it. We have to get our message out there and we have to build our community. We have to keep finding ways to navigate these market changes. Number 10, use of caution, managing crisis. If you don't get good at managing pitfalls and crisis, you're never going to get to the next level. You're never going to win the race. You're never going to be able to get back on the track because you are going to experience this countless times and you have to get comfortable. You have to get good at it and you have to be ready. You have to be prepared. Maybe you're not going to be ready, but you're going to be prepared. You don't know when the crisis is going to happen. So when faced with challenges such as technical difficulties or PR issues, use these moments to learn and strengthen your show. Address issues transparently with your audience and make necessary adjustments to avoid future pitfalls. So what does this look like? For instance, you have a technical issue with your mixing board and you can only use your phone. Still post up on all the social media platforms that your audience follows you on and say, hey, we're having this experience. The show must go on. Watch how we solve this problem. Watch how we move through this technical issue. Maybe it's not the best quality, but we still delivered a show. Or you know what? I'm having a really rough week. Mentally, I'm exhausted. I need some support from my community. Let them know. Maybe you are taking a break. Maybe you're not going to take the break. Maybe you're going to use that energy and push it through your podcast episodes. And maybe this particular episode's a special one because maybe you don't address mental health awareness or anything personal about yourself. And so you're dedicating this one episode to you, talking about this and sharing that. That's going to bring everybody closer. And yeah, you're opening yourself up to vulnerability, to judgment, to criticism, but that's okay because you're starting the conversation and that conversation will help you get through the crisis. Make sure that you're managing these things. It's not over. It just means you have to get back up. You have to figure it out. You have to go at it again. We don't get better or stronger if we just lay down. By the first time we see a challenge, a pitfall, a crisis, or something that's way too heavy to pick up, we keep working at it. And that builds that momentum. Just make sure that when you're working at it, you're doing it, you're not overthinking, you're doing it wisely, you're not doing it from a place of burnout. You're really doing it out of a place of passion, hunger, determination to succeed. And that, my friends, will help you in the long run with your podcasting. So by applying these NASCAR-inspired strategies that I've put together for you, you can enhance your show's quality, grow your audience, and create lasting impact in your podcasting community. Each episode is a lap in your podcast race. And with strategic planning and execution, you're set for the podium finish. And I want all of you to get a win. If there's anything I've ever said on any of my episodes that I want you to remember the most, it is this right here. I want you to succeed, whether it benefits me or not. I just want to see you win. You need more people like that in your corner. People that are around you that don't benefit at all from your success and they just want to see you win. When is the last time that you personally went out there and wanted to support someone else and say, I want to see you win no matter what. I don't have to get a win. I don't have to get a thank you. I don't have to benefit at all from your victory. I just want to see you win. When you have those type of people in your life, when you become that type of person, everything opens up for you. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It just means it opens up because you come from a place of giving and you serve. And we all need to pull together to make sure that we all win this race. Because at the end of the day, we need each other. And without each other, we can't go anywhere. I am not self-made. I've been built and crafted and lifted up by so many people over the years. And that's why I'm here and that's why I'm giving back. And listen, just because you're on top doesn't mean you can't get knocked back down. Just because you won the race and you won the championship last year doesn't mean you're going to win it again this year. You start over. It doesn't matter how hard you work. Those same strategies are not going to work again unless you improve on them. I want you to remember that. So with that being said, I just want to remind you that, again, you can download this free guide that goes along with this podcast episode by going to buymeacoffee.com/in-the-rough, and you can access it there. It's absolutely free. And once you download this guide and you start applying these strategies, please let me know what you're experiencing. How is it coming along? Like, what did you take from this? Did you get a win? I want to know. DM me on Instagram at Zebulon Thomas or at the Podcast in the Rough on Instagram. Send me a message in the Facebook group. In fact, I'm going to share that information right now, how you can get into my personal podcast community mastermind group. Let's go to that right now. Okay, once again, if you would like to join me inside the Podcast Community Mastermind Facebook group, it is absolutely free. All you have to do is go to thepodcastintherough.com/learn. That is thepodcastintherough.com/learn, and get inside the group and learn how to podcast from start to success. If you'd like to support this podcast, buy me a coffee by heading over to buymeacoffee.com/in-the-rough and become part of the adventure by showing your support and taking advantage of any one of our exciting membership tiers. The Podcast in the Rough. And that, my friends, is all I have for you today on this episode. I hope it has given you tremendous value and opened your eyes to what podcasting can do for you. And go check out a few more NASCAR races. They're a lot of fun. Take care. This is the Podcast in the Rough.